Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here for another fantastic episode. Y'all, this is an episode that I'll go ahead and say with the preface that Jason, I put him on like a warning before we did this episode of like, we just got to hone it in because this is definitely one that we can both get ranty about. So Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. We're literally, I'll tell you this, we're about to have like a little mini storm come through. Like I had to go put my comfort jacket on Token because Token gets real nervous around storms. So she's literally panting and walking around. So that's more of a head up than anything. That I'm doing great. I'm in the basement, driving home in the rain. So hopefully everything goes okay.
I feel that. I'm glad that we both have dogs that are like storm averse. So when Token gets nervous in the storm, what does Castle do? Like, does Castle just ignore it?
Castle doesn't get phased at anything. Fireworks, guns, whatever. She doesn't get phased at anything. She's just laying on the bed right now. It could be the craziest storm and Castle won't care. Whereas Token knows a storm is like 50 miles away because we know she starts looking around and she starts panting. Pull up the radar. Oh, yeah, there's a storm all the way over in Roanoke, but okay, because she knows it's in the area. And that's how I knew it. I didn't even know we were supposed to have night, and I saw her acting up earlier. And I looked up, I'm like, yeah, we have this really thin line of like heavy rain that's about to hit us. So I had to get her. We have one of those little like jackets that hold really tight that's supposed to try to she seems to like it. It helps her some, but she still pants and she'll stand up and sit down and stand up and sit down. What about yours? Do your dogs, how do they react when it comes to storm averseness?
Yeah, so Moose is a dog that has extreme anxiety. Like Moose takes medicine every day for his anxiety. And then he has medication that he takes during storms because it gets so bad. But Lucy is not afraid of storms. She's not bothered by them, but she wants to attack them, if that makes any sense. And so like storms will hit, like you'll hear like a lightning crack or something like that. And Lucy will just go nuts barking at it and chasing the sound around the house, which creates even more sound. So poor little Moose is just like traumatized hearing these noises. And so most times I can tell when a storm is coming because it's same thing. Like he will just come run and be shaking, sitting on my feet under my desk. And I'm like, all right, bud, I'll go get your medicine and get you nice and sedated. Yeah.
We haven't done medicine for Token, but we've talked about it because she's always been storm averse. Because she just pants and she shakes and she tries to get in closets. Like, I'm downstairs in the basement and I have my side game closet where there's shelves. There's no space. She was in there trying to get in there with no space in there just a few minutes ago. So she's laying down right now. So we'll see.
Yeah. We have many places in our house that have been destroyed because it's like separation anxiety. Moose doesn't have separation anxiety until a storm comes. And it's like a couple times Moose got left at home with a storm and like just destroyed everything trying to find peace somewhere. So it is, we love animals. They're great. But also they bring some difficulties at times. But things that aren't difficult and stormy weather means we can stay inside and play a few games. Jason, what games have you been playing lately?
I have got to play a few games lately for sure. I think I've said before, our new thing is a game to the table. We're going to play at least twice. And so I've been to Board Game Arena, bought a bunch of solo games, but the two games I want to talk about today are not that much alike at all. So the first one I want to talk about is called Project L. It's a polyomino game, insane production, in that you're basically getting small little plastic pieces. They're really small. They come in what we've talked about before, like Tetris style shapes, polyomino shapes. Like there's a one that's just a little one square or a 1x2 or like the 3 with the L looking thing. So you get some of those pieces and you're getting game board pieces, little individual ones that have indentation. So it's dual layered. And basically as part of your actions, you're putting pieces in there to fill that up, which gets you more pieces. And then you fill it up and you get in-game points. Oversimplifying it, because on each turn you take 4 actions. You take 4 actions any of them more than one major of those boards. You can have up to 4 of those boards. The ultimate goal is basically to continue to fill up those little goal boards with your multiple pieces, which give you more pieces or in-game points. Super light. Here's how this is revealing some of my addiction to board games. I bought the original project called Project L. I bought the original Kickstarter. We played it once or twice. Me, Elizabeth, and Ryder was like, wow, this is insanely light. Okay. I sold it immediately, made a profit. So that was good. And then they did the reprints last year. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll buy it again. And so I literally bought the same game again. And then we played it the other night. I'm like, yeah, this is super light. Great to teach beginners for, but a super light game. But the Kickstarter edition comes with all these other expansions that give you kind of some more goals. We just played the basic game for sure. But it's a fun polyomino style game. I like that kind of gameplay. I even have, when you come up in a couple weeks, a polyomino game we're going to play for sure that I wanted to play for a while because it's one I'd like us to cover. But I like the puzzle nature of a polyomino game, which you're trying to figure out the pieces. Okay, well, if I get this piece on this next turn, those are going to take that one, but this lets me do this. I like kind of doing that combo-ness on how I can get this, which gives me this, which lets me do that as well. We know I like combo pieces for sure. I even shot you some photos of it. What did you think about just from the visual aspects of those photos I sent you?
Dude, polyomino games are like, I think the more that I play games and the more I look at them, like I always go back to the first polyomino game that I ever played was Blockus, however you want to describe it. And I always felt like I can never convince other people to play that game with me because it takes a certain like type of brain to play those games. So I'm very intrigued because, like you said, the production value on this thing, insane. That you sent, like I would have. You could have told me that, it's insane, y'all. But you've got me hooked on the idea, Jason, of like light polyomino game, because I do feel like most polyomino games feel pretty like sweaty wasn't the right, crunchy. That's the word I was looking for.
Crunchy.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. Excited to try it.
Yeah,
try it.
There's a good chance it'll be this trip. I have a way too long list of games I want to show because Project L, even though we're talking about it now, could definitely be a feature game because it's $40 on Amazon, has lots of replayability, and even the base game, what I showed you, there was no special things in that. Just the Kickstarter game came with all these expansions. So the base standard retail game has those nice chunky pieces, the dual layered boards. So it's definitely a fun one. The second game I played, and why I say they're different is like Project L is very industrial, minimalist in its color. The boards are all black and white, and the pieces are all different colors. So has a very stark like design to it. Like we play a lot of board games, there are a lot of colors, a lot of design. We talked about Sagrada last week, right? Wild designs. Project L is not that. It's very sleek, and I actually like that because it's so different from other games I've played. This next game I'm going to talk about, the artwork's amazing. It's called Meadow. It's basically where thematically you are building a meadow and attracting animals and things to your meadow. It's essentially a set collection game with a super cool, super unique action selecting mechanism. You basically have a board in front of you that has 12 cards, and the gist of the game is trying to get those cards to your meadow. You're playing those cards based on certain rules and constraints on how you can play those cards. You're playing those cards in front of you in your meadow. But you have these little pieces that you put on the side of the board that may have like a 2 on it. So that means you're going to take the second card of that row, or if you do the 3 one from the bottom, the third card in that column. So it's just super fun on how you get to select those. And then whenever you do that, you can play a card, or then you can, the bottom side of these little pieces can also go on another board, and you put it on the bottom side in, and now you're taking a different action. So on one board has all these cards that piece against the side of the board, and it's basically showing where you want to go grab a card. But on the other board, you put it in backwards, basically the back of it, and it lets you do another unique action, like just choose a single card off the other board, or play 2 cards from your hand, or look through one of these stacks of cards to choose a card. Lots of fun in there. Sounds heavier than it is. Meadows is a little lighter, or just slightly heavier than Project L, but the artwork is just amazing. If you're a nature themed gamer, every card I pulled out, I was like, that's awesome. That's all. It's all unique artwork on there's ground cards that have to be at the bottom of each of your columns, and those are similar art, but every other card has jackalopes, it has deer, it has bison, it has fungus, it has moss. Like, those are some of the cards, and the artwork was just striking, super quick play. It's another one, like, we could easily talk about that because it's so entry level. It gives you that next level of strategy, because you are trying to think, because during the game you get points for the card on your card. It has points on there, but you also have some goals where, like, if you have these two icons, you can now claim this bonus. That's Meadow. It doesn't get both of those games in the board game reviewer world. They're pretty beloved, but as it's a solid 7 to people, right? Like a solid chocolate chip cookie, or maybe just peanut butter cookie, right? Just fine. Yeah. Nothing great. But for crunchy gamers, okay, we want crunchier stuff. But if you want to go light, Meadow is so fun, and the artwork was super nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the game that we played. It seems very adjacent to this, and I can't remember if it was cards or tokens. But it, like, looking at the board of Meadow, I remember, I think it was me, you, Nate, and Elizabeth played the last time I was up there. And there was like 4 columns.
Oh, Floriferous. Where we were going left to right and choosing another unique action selection. I love that. I love Floriferous because it is similar, definitely adjacent, like, without doubt adjacent. Okay. You are choosing your cards in that way. Yeah, it's Floriferous was the game.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I'm all about, I think if I'm rating my, like, favorite themes to get into, Vikings in Japan are at the top, and it's not like they stand so far above everything else. But I think I'm finding more and more nature games, that nature theme. I kind of love the playfulness that you get in a nature theme. I think of Everdell. For some reason, I just keep coming back to Everdell, because this could be wrong, but Everdell feels like the gold standard in my heart of, like, nature themes. That would be a fun episode, Jason, to, like, when you think this theme, what game comes to mind?
Oh yeah, that would actually be a great episode. We have to write that down. Remember that at some point, to talk about if we think Vikings, if we think Japan, if we think traveling. When you talked about that nature seems appealing, the reason why I think it may be appealing to people is because it's something we can actually relate to. Vikings are cool, but they're foreign to us. We only know what we've read or we've watched in movies or TV shows. If you haven't traveled to Asian countries, you only know what you've seen in TV or whatever. But nature, I see deer in my backyard all the time. I have dog about dog park. I can see birds thinking about wingspan. So those things, I can relate to those things. So I see how those, maybe that's why they even appeals to me, because the striking, but it's things I know, and I know what that is. I know what that is, a real tangible thing to me. So it may connect, especially for people who like space may mean nothing to them because they don't want to go to space, right? Well, Japan may not be there, but to see the cute animals in Everdell as they do hits the spot.
Well, y'all, both games that I'm going to talk about that I've played recently, I actually played with Jason, because Jason and I, between these 2 episodes, we got to spend so many hours together. And it's a weird thing, because I thought about this, Jason. We were together Thursday night through Sunday evening, essentially.
Yep.
And I feel like we probably spent about as much time together in that stretch, like that 3 to 4 day stretch, as we normally do when I'm there for a whole week. Because normally when I'm there for the week visiting, it's like, oh, we're working during the day and Jason's at the warehouse and I'm out filming with the guys, things like that. And then we hang out in the evenings. But basically, Jason and I were together from like, we woke up, we were the first people each other saw. And we were the last ones we saw before we went to bed. And there was about a 2 to 4 hour period where I went and caddied for someone. And then other than that, we were just hanging out. And that, I loved it. So we got back and we played board games. And we played a 2-player game called Claim. And I'm just learning, like, truly, I'm going to have like thoughts. The more I play games, I have an initial thought on the game. And 9 times out of 10, that initial thought is probably going to be rough. Not in terms of like bad or I dislike it or something like that. Sometimes that may be the case, but like I definitely have to process games longer than I give it credit for. Because my gut check on almost every game is usually mediocre. Claim, I have almost pulled the trigger on a Claim like mega box multiple times. The more that I've thought about this game, because Claim. So the idea of Claim, y'all, is it's trick taking, but it's like trick taking dueling kind of a deal. So the tricks, or instead of suits, there are factions, races, however you want to describe it, of these different. In the base set, there are 5 factions, and they all have like a special trait to them. So when you play 2 rounds. And round 1, when you play, when you win, you're playing for a card, and whoever wins the trick, they take that face-up card to build their deck for the next round. And then whoever loses just gets the random top card off of the remaining deck. So you build through, and then and at the end of both rounds, whoever has the most of each faction or race basically gets a point, and it's best out of 5 for those 5 available points type deal. We played it twice, and tough play when you're not in a good mental headspace, because I am willing to admit I messed up the first one because it was like, oh no, like we miscounted and we had the wrong number. We're like, I don't know how to do this. And then I definitely misplayed a card later on, and it was like, I broke Trump. So Jason, thoughts on Claim as a trick taker?
As a trick taker, I think it's for those who like trick taking, those who followed us, we talked about the Crew. The Crew's probably the greatest tabletop board game trick taking game there is. There's no doubt. I mean, it's 2 versions of it, or this one's on BGG, the next one, and they're both in the top 70. The next one's like in the 300s, right? So if you discount how great the Crew is, I like Claim. It's not the best game ever, but as a quick, easy, fun little light game, if you like trick taking, if you have someone who to play it with, which Elizabeth is a trick taker as well, so we've played it a lot, and we have Claim too, I think it's just fine. If I gave it a rating, like we don't usually do cookie ratings for early stuff, but it would be middle, maybe bottom, right? Maybe a sugar cookie, because it's just fine. But because you can find it for often the base game for like 10 or 15 bucks, and if you just like 2-player games, because of the randomness of it, every game can be different. And you have to accept, and you kind of talked about it, we talked about it after that night, with any game in which you're getting a card randomly, you just got to deal with the cards you're played. And sometimes you may get smoked in that game because you got a bunch of 1s and 2s, and the other person got a bunch of 8s or 9s, or it may be evenly distributed. So I like Claim. Like, it's one, whenever I think about purging all my small box games, Claim is never even in that mindset, because I know it's such a quick, easy, hey, we could play 2, 3 or 4 games of Claim in less than an hour if we just want to go through that. So I like it. What are your kind of final thoughts? I know you're still processing it, but you said you're close to pulling a trigger on it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's one to definitely have in the collection. I think if Lindsay and I are traveling, it would be one that I could see us bringing with us and almost keeping a copy of it, like in the car. Like, oh no, we have this wait at a restaurant. We could sit on a bench and play Claim. And what intrigues me about Claim is because Lindsay and I are big Smash Up fans. Like, that is our most played game as a couple by far. And Claim feels like when we don't want to play Smash Up, like we don't want to invest the mental energy to go through a whole round of Smash Up, because when you know the factions of Smash Up, it gets intense on the like top side of strategy for that one. And we have the big box Claim. There's a bunch of expansions which add a whole just host of factions into it.
Yeah.
So it's like baby Smash Up, which I think really ups it for us. So I'm definitely going to pull the trigger on it. for future trips for Lindsay and I. The only biggest critique is the fact that it stops at 2. Like, because of how the game's set up. So if you're looking for a good 2-player game and you're trick takers, it could be a great option. The other one I'll just go over real fast because I know we've been chatting about these games a lot is Wormspan. Wingspan, but for dragons. I literally have long sleeves on right now while we're filming this episode for those of you who are watching, because I just got the next installment of my sleeve today. And for those of you, not to be gross, but like for those of you who knows how tattoos work, blood plasma is produced. And so my arm has second skin on top of it, and that plasma is all there. And my wife is very squeamish. So I don't want her to come home and like see that. So I will be wearing long sleeves around her until I remove said second skin. What a time. But I say all that because I literally just got a dragon tattooed on my upper arm. Like, this is all a dragon's head right now. So I love Wingspan and I love dragons. What would I not love about this game? And the more I think about it, I really do. I think I can separate my love of Wingspan and Wormspan to me, there is definitely room to have both in the collection. Like, because they play so differently. Like, talking with Big Germ, who inside the disc golf world is a Wingspan lover, there is such a satisfaction to getting a fantastic engine going in Wingspan, and just, it's kind of fun running it from round 3 all the way to the end and just seeing what else ends up happening. And in Wormspan, that's just not possible. Like, you can actually only run your engine 3 times, and then you're done. So but I think that that's really fun, and probably also creates more competitive games, because you also, if we were playing Wingspan and like Jason just gets that engine running, I'll know pretty fast as an experienced Wingspan player, like, I don't stand a chance. Like, this game is over. And so we just have to ride it out. Whereas from even looking at the games, Jason, you've played more Wormspan than I. There doesn't seem to have been, even when we were talking overall points, there doesn't seem to be that many blowouts in Wormspan.
Yeah, that's true. The one game that we had the closest thing to a blowout was the closest we've seen to a good engine going that Elizabeth got. She got one where every time she did something, she got a meat, and then the very next thing, if you put a meat down, you got something else. So she had this crazy meat train going. But she acknowledged she literally got that card. Her very first card she played was perfect, and her very second dragon she played was perfect. That's the luck of the draw. And yeah, there's a couple of those that tag up there well, but when it hit perfect from the beginning, and she still did a variety of stuff, it definitely can help. Really, the blowout game, and we talked about it, was that what I like about Wormspan is that's an action selection system, in that you have 6 actions every round. You use a coin for it. But some things let you get more coins, which lets you take more actions. So if you're lucky enough to get, and it's rare because I've played now 10 games of Wormspan, it's only happened once, but Elizabeth was just able to get a bunch of coins early, which basically gave her additional actions. Going to your point there, which is why I like the difference in that, as you said, in Wingspan, I've never played it, but I'm in the Facebook groups, in that if your cards hit right, you're tucking 30, 40 cards, right? And because you're doing that over and over and over and over and over if the cards hit right, which, if you're trying to win, that's great. But to me, I like a variety of stuff. Like, to me, I'm very much, I want to get something in everything, and I'm going for the goals and whatever. I like that Wormspan kind of forces you to have to do those things. So far in 8 plays, there's no single track to guarantee that you win. That track may help you do other things, but not to be like, I'm a tuck engine, there's nothing you can do about it. Talk about what you referenced earlier. So I like that about Wormspan. What I told Brad, one of our good friends, who's a big Wingspan fan, I said, if you're a hardcore game collector, and you're not a hardcore game collector, but you buy enough games that both in the collection makes sense. But if you only have a handful of games and you already love Wingspan, play Wormspan first and make your decision, but definitely don't buy it without playing it, because it's great. But if you don't buy a bunch of games, which Brad and them, because they play the games they have a lot, like we did when our kids were younger, don't go buy Wormspan until you play with us. And then that way you can decide, hey, is it worth it or not? Like Dakota doesn't. I don't think Dakota owns Wingspan, but I bought an extra copy of Wormspan, and he just bought mine. And he's played it a lot, and even Marissa likes it and has been teaching it to people, and they're loving it as well. So it's hit them harder, and he's definitely much a bigger Wormspan fan than Wingspan, but he never owned Wingspan.
Yeah, yeah, and that to me, Wingspan on the app is part of why I loved it so much, because it sets everything up so fast. And I know you even talked about like playing Wingspan on Board Game Arena. Yep. What a breath of fresh air, because you can move through games so fast when it's out there for you. And that is also like, because I can play a game of Wingspan, especially if I play against like the hardest difficulty bots, I can play a game of Wingspan in under 20 minutes via the app. And there's a satisfaction to that as well. And I'm sure Wormspan will be made into an app one day, and it'll hit Board Game Arena and do all that. And I probably will end up like, I could see myself doing like, like Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays are Wormspan nights when I go to bed. And but like the other 4, and maybe it switches, things like that. Just to keep them both interesting. So y'all, with that being said, let's dive into our main game, which is a classic, one of the big 3. We are talking about Ticket to Ride. You guys have seen it in the thumbnail, you've seen it in the title. Ticket to Ride came out in 2004. When we say OG games, I mean this is like, when you talk about modern hobby gaming, I think when we go 20 years from now and people say I play board games, this will be in the same discussion as if you ask someone if you play board games now. Oh, Sorry and Monopoly and things like that. Like, I think Sorry and Monopoly will end up being vintage to like antique board games, and Ticket to Ride will be discussed amongst the classics. Designed by Alan Moon, published by Days of Wonder. Days of Wonder, some iconic, truly iconic games. I don't know if they're still publishing a lot of games, but 2 to 5 players, plays in 30 to 60 minutes. It's a Spiels de Jars winner. De Jars. I'm not going to try to dive into it. I'm going to give in Ticket to Ride, players collect various types of train cars that they use to claim railway routes in North America. The longer the routes, the more points they earn. You can gain additional points come to those who fulfill destination tickets, which are goal cards that connect certain distant cities, and the player who builds the longest continuous route also gains points. So that's the overall, like, the 10,000 foot view. Jason, bring us into like how the game actually plays out.
Yeah, no problem. So in the game, essentially you have 3 actions. Again, we love talking about gameplay being easy. There's 3 actions. The in-game scoring is from 3 different things, and then you have 3 actions. So talk about in-game scoring is you have tickets that you'll take during the game that have goals on there. Like going from New York to New Orleans is 8 points. So if you complete that route, if you have the longest continuous route, you're going to get 10 points. The longest continuous route of trains with no break in there. And then you get points for how large your sets of trains that are on there. Right on the board, it shows you because some routes that you're trying to fill have like only 1 train goes there. Some are 2, some are 3, some are 4, some are 5, some are 6. The longest route you'll complete, the longest set you'll complete, set of trains at one time, is 6, and that's worth 15 points. The gameplay is you're taking train cards. So basically little cards that have trains on there that have the different colors. Blue, yellow, orange, white. You either take 2 train cards from a face-up row, or you play trains to the board. When you play trains, you're turning in those cards, the set collection. Oh, I'm going to play 3 blues, so I turn in 3 blues, put out 3 of my trains on a set that has 3. And then the third action you can take is actually taking more tickets. At the beginning of the game, you're dealt 3, and you have to choose at least 1. So you have a private goal. Those tickets are essentially private in-game scoring goals. And so during the game, you're taking tickets to basically set collect. Okay, I need to go from Portland down to Los Angeles. There's green there and there's yellow there. I mean, you're not saying this out loud. That's all in your mind. And you're trying to get those. And at some point, you're going to play 4 yellow, play those 4 out. And then once you've completed those routes, you could do it beforehand, but once in your mind, you've completed the route, you can now take 3 new tickets, destination tickets, choose one to keep for your action. And that's the base of the game. everyone just keep playing. It's a quick game. Everyone does one of those three actions: takes tickets, plays trains, or destination ticket. Once a single player has less than 3 trains left, you start with 45 little trains that you're putting on board. Once a single player has less than 3, everybody gets one more turn, including the player who started the last round, essentially. And at the end of the game, highest score wins.
Yeah. So this is a game that, like, if I were going to have people over who I knew had never played anything beyond a Sorry, a Monopoly, a whatever game that may be, the odds of us playing Ticket to Ride are incredibly high. I look at my mother-in-law, who is one of the most new board game averse people I've ever met. If I'm like, hey, we're going to play a new game, I just don't know if I can handle it right now. Mom, I haven't even told you what the game is. We have not even discussed it. Ticket to Ride is a game that not only did we get, but we introduced her to it, and we now have a copy that stays at her house. This game, a classic. It's so simple to play, so easy to play, but strategy can change not only based on like how in depth you want to go in strategy, but also how the type of people that you're playing with, that can adjust accordingly. For instance, Jason and I have played this game before together. We've only played it once together.
Yep.
And when we played, we had 2 folks, Brad and Kimberly, who had never played it before. And then you have me, Jason, and Elizabeth, who have all played this a lot. And so I was like, okay, how do I want to do this? I think I'm going to go no routes. I'm just going to go big trains and try to get the longest route going. I'm just going to see if I can go raw points, visible points, and really take those options away from everyone else to get the points. Because one thing about the train routes is that you do get points for those train routes individually, like when they go on the board. Even if you don't connect anything, you get points for those. And they scale up, but exponentially is the right word. I was trying to think of another word for this, but it wasn't right. So if you have a 1 train route, it's 1 point. If you have a 2 train route, it's 2 points. But if you have a 3 train route, it's not 3 points. It's 5 or something like that.
It's 4.
Yeah. And 4 is
7.
Do you know? Yeah. So it keeps ramping up. And then when you get to the 6 train route, it's major points, major points. But there's only a fixed number of 6 train routes on the board. So you can take the strategy of I'm just going to go for all the 6 train routes. And that should work. But when we played that game, I think we got halfway through and Jason realized Robbie's doing that. It's just happening. And Elizabeth also realized Robbie's just going for the big routes. And so then it turns into a little back and forth game of well, I've got to take one of them because the more I take off the board, that's going to work. Jason, you've played way more than I have. You were talking about you even have the original version. Tell us about you've been playing this for so long. What are some of your favorite strategies to try to adapt in this? Because I'm sure you tried them all at this point.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that because that's the one. Whenever I put anything out on a 6, and Elizabeth automatically starts accusing me of only going for the big routes. If I fill out a 6, she goes, "I know what you're doing. You're just trying to get all the big routes." I'm like, "They're 15 points each. Why wouldn't I go for that?" But I really, because one of my old friend from college, Joey, who got me in the games. This is the first true hobby game I played. He even said, it won't make sense when you first play it, but as soon as we're done, you're going to want to play it again. And sure enough, as soon as we're done, we're taking a ride. We played it again immediately. and we bought like within a week we had bought Ticket to Ride. Like what I was showing Robbie beforehand is this was released in 2004. I bought mine in 2006, but it still has like the games catalog. Days of Wonder used to put a games catalog in there, so my games catalog has 2005 on there. So I've had this game for 18 years and love it. But it's what, so Robbie already kind of highlighted one big level of strategy. The other strategy I typically go for is that you'll get a card that says, hey, go from Seattle to New York. That's all the way across the board, right? And it's very challenging to do depending on how many players are in the game. If you have 5 players in the game, you will be lucky to get a cross-board thing. But if I gave away my 100%, my number one strategy is always try to go like Los Angeles, New York, because if you complete that, and then when you take tickets later on, you may get some little offshoot of Los Angeles to Oklahoma City, or Los Angeles to Miami, or New York to Oklahoma City, or New York to Atlanta. So my number one strategy is often doing that, but sometimes it's driven by the beginning of the game, what 3 tickets you're given. Because I think you're dealt 3, or maybe it's 4, and you have to keep 1. And so you can keep as many as you want. But if you get some of the tickets are little bitty things, like Oklahoma City to Phoenix. It's like literally 2 routes. It's like 5 points. If all your first 4 tickets are all small things like that, well then, okay, your game is kind of set for you. And I do a bunch of little bitty ones and just have like a ton of routes connected, because you can start messing with people. If you're connecting a bunch of these little bitty routes in the middle of the country, now you're messing with people. And we haven't quite talked about it, but Robbie mentioned it, and I even put in our show notes. You can play Ticket to Ride light and breezy, or Ticket to Ride can be vicious. Like I don't play vicious games like that. And Elizabeth will accuse me of blocking her. I don't ever block her, but the train route I put down, the set I put down may end up blocking her. But if you go for a bunch of those little routes, you're clogging the middle of the country, things that they can or can't get to. Because most cities, almost every single city has 2 routes going into it. But those 2 routes are only available in a 4-player game, maybe a 3-player game. But in a 2-player game, they are not available. You can only do one of those 2 routes. So it may have like from Salt Lake to Denver, it may have a red and a yellow route. You can do whichever one you want, but once in a 2-player game, once someone's claimed that route, no one else can claim the other one. In a 4 or 5-player game, you can claim both those routes, so you have a little bit of freedom. But there's also more people clogging that up, and you get a feel for the feel for the game as people are putting things. Okay, are they going for long stuff? Are they going for short stuff? Do I need to go grab that? There's a couple of things that are a single route. You're like, do I grab that one from New Orleans to Columbus or whatever that's way down there just to get it? First thing, so no one else can get that thing. I've tried them all. Sometimes if it hits, I'll try to go for all the 6s because there's 1 of each color, so there's 6, and then there's an all gray one. So there's a lot of routes on the board are just gray, so any color can go in there. We also didn't mention that you have the 6 colors of the trains, but there's also a wild card as well. So you also have a wild that's in the deck that can kind of help you out during the game to be for anything. So you like that? Is that your strategy, Robbie? The 6, or do you kind of modify it as well?
I definitely modify based on who I'm playing with. So like if I know I'm playing with the majority of a great example, I don't think she's home yet. But my sister-in-law is visiting this week. And she is Chaos Agent. Like if she's in the game, I know that she is going to look for short routes. Like she does like every time we play, basically. Like she's taking short routes, and then she just wants to disrupt what everyone else is doing. But if Abby's not playing, then I know, okay, I have the opportunity to go for a longer route type deal, instead of like those longer plays. Because one thing about the tickets is if you take a ticket and you don't complete it, it's actually negative points on the end of the game, which is an important thing for people to know. And I think actually a really cool concept to teach newer players in this, like there are private goals, but those can come back to bite you, because one of your actions during the turn is to take more train routes and to get those. So when you draw during it, I think you draw 3.
You draw.
But you always, if you take 3, like whenever you get 3 options, you have to keep one of them. So that's where if you've established late in the game, you're like, oh man, this is okay. I'm gonna go tickets. And so you look at those and you have those opportunities, and sometimes you get blessed, and like Jason mentioned, you've already completed one of them, which is great. Or it's like, oh, all I got to do is like just do this one little route and I'm good. Okay, awesome. And that's free points kind of a deal. Something that I know Jason and I, we talked about 5 Tribes. We didn't do it as a main game, but like we talked about it as a game that I had played. And that you can kind of push the end of the game to come sooner rather than later, because like we mentioned, when you run out of trains, that's it. Like the game is going to end. You can sneak up on the end of the game. So that is something I always try to do regardless of what I'm doing, is I want to be the one to end the game. Because that just means I have more trains out on the board than most people, which is more point potential opportunity. Because traditionally I struggled to complete routes. Like that is, whether it's I show my hand too obviously, or then the next time I play, I'll be like, I don't want to show my hand that I'm trying to get from Atlanta to Oklahoma City. So I'll just kind of drop some routes along the way and, oh no, I'm blocked. And so what's beautiful about Ticket to Ride is while you can get blocked early on in the game, someone taking a route of yours is not game ending, which I think is actually a really cool learning aspect of the game, that you can always, most of the time you can sneak around and get back to that city. It just may take you a little bit longer in that aspect of things. Jason, talk about, like, because as a family of 5, I'm sure y'all have played this because it plays up to 5. Y'all have probably played this a lot. Talk about the pacing of the game from like, okay, if the Collins family sits down and plays this versus like we put new players in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll even step back a little bit to talk about how you hit the nail. As Collins gamers, this was a game that we really helped teach our kids modern tabletop gaming, because it's so easy. Like we say that about so many games, and we intentionally choose easier games to play, but this has enough. You feel like you're doing a lot because the production value, 4 little trains, they're kind of fun to play with. You have these cool cards that are basic trains, but the artwork's great, the board's nice. And so for our kids, we played, if you looked at our Ticket to Ride game, the cards are just worn out because they've been held so many times. But Elizabeth would play it a ton with, we homeschooled our kids, we played a ton with them at home, and they always play with their trains face up. So everybody saw everybody's thing because they weren't worried to beat anybody else. They were trying to figure out how to do set collection. And so they went out there and have those trains just sitting up in front of them and how to play it. And it's a great game for that. But because we've done that so much to go to the pace of the game, like Elizabeth and I, and you were there even when we played with Brad and Kimberly, like this is a game, like others we've mentioned, it's almost like it's a comfort game in that I don't even have to think. Like I just play, I just grab it. Like we always talked about, you like being the guy who's refilling the cards. I like being the guy who's refilling the cards because at least it gives me something to do because I go so fast. Elizabeth's the same way when we played the other day. She's like, oh, you're going to do the cards. I was like, well, you do cards. We do the cards because it's just so quick. Like to the point, like we've played it so much that we barely have to think because we know from here to here, we've already looked at that and we know the board so well. Like, okay, we know the colors are there. Like I don't have it memorized, but I look at it once, I remember it. Okay, I need pinks, I need whites. Okay, whites, pinks. Okay, start going from the deck. One from the deck, one from whatever, right? The gameplay can be super fast, but the good thing about that is, you know, I get frustrated with slower players and people talking too much. It's a game for gamers who know how to do it. You can talk and still play because it's not Calico Crunchy where you're being quiet and thinking through, holy, this one move could change everything. It's very quick gameplay. Whereas if you have newer players, it's really not a slow gameplay by any stretch. At the beginning, they're trying to conceptualize, what am I doing again? You're getting colors and turning colors in to put trains down. That's really what you're doing. You're taking cards that have colors and turning those cards together with colors. Once they kind of grok, it's really just taking trains with colors and turning them back in on their turn, the pace speeds up. Like even with newer players, who you would introduce games to, it's not a crawl by any stretch of the imagination. It becomes a conversational social type game as well. Social in a party game, but a social in that you can have conversations because your turn is so quick. It's my turn. Okay. Green. Okay, good. Like, even if you weren't paying attention, when it comes back to your turn, you're not thinking, okay, well, I'm going to put this here to do this. It's going to activate this card. I love those games, by the way. But if you're not ready for your turn, it comes to your turn. You can be like, okay, what cards are available? I know I need green. Let me take the green. And now it's the next player. The pace for hardcore gamers like us, super fast, can be. For new players, it's not slow by any stretch. And I think that's what's great about Ticket to Ride. Is that your experience as well, Robbie?
Totally. And one thing that I think if you wanna go fast pace, honestly, you can track your points actively while you're going, or you can just be like, one really great thing about Ticket to Ride is that you can track points at the very end and have not tracked points at all, like for any of your routes whatsoever, because sometimes it gets even more confusing when you're like, I think we caught most of the routes. Did we get the points right? Did we not get the points right? But Jason nailed it. Like, one reason when I play with my in-laws, I am always the ticket refiller, because I'm used to a world of playing Ticket to Ride with lots of folks that know this game like the back of their hand, like Jason's mentioning. Like, oh, I'm trying to get down to Florida. Awesome. Okay, I know that there's orange getting down to Florida. Sick. Like, the big orange track, the big six is all it's there. Like, you learn those aspects of the game, so you know what you're looking for, what you're hunting, things like that. So when my turn comes around, whoever's next after me, most often, unless I'm laying trains, usually misses my turn, because I'm just, okay, I'm taking tickets. One of the aspects of ticket taking that I think is really, or not even train cards, I'm taking train cards, that's really cool is, so there are wilds that exist in the cards that count as anything, right? But when you take 2 train cards. If you take a wild that's face up, you only take 1. But at any point, if you don't like the train cards that are present, you can take from the deck. So if you take like one black train card, and then you take from the top of the deck, there's a potential like you could get a wild out of that, which is fantastic, right? Like that positive interactions there. I like the randomness of it in that aspect of things, that you could, in theory, we talked about this with Claim, you could, in theory, just play top of the deck the whole time. Like Yu-Gi-Oh! Heart of the Cards, don't fail me now, here we go, and you're just drawing the entire time. That is a rush. If you've never tried that in a game, Jason, just to be like, I want to see if I can win, and I don't actually pick my train cards the entire game, it's a blast. Like, it is the most satisfying win I've ever had in Ticket to Ride. And if Ticket to Ride gets stale for me, I love that like, there's so many nuances inside of it that you can refresh it as you play, re-step it up. Let's talk, before we jump into cookie rating, let's talk expansions real fast, because I do feel like, because this game released in 2004, the expansions are worth noting. So talk expansions for us, Jason, because you know the expansions honestly better than I do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's expansions and even other versions of the game. So, like, what I would say for sure, and like Robbie's right, of all games we've talked about, because of its age and the number of other variations of this, we have to talk about the other ones and acknowledge the other ones, because we're talking about the OG one. But if you got one of the other ones, it could still be your double doozy, because it's different enough. There's a couple of smaller expansions. One's called USA 1910. It essentially adds, and I have that expansion. We had it from the time it came out. But essentially adds more train cars, more train routes, adds a new in-game, the most tickets, gets what's called the Globetrotter. So now it's a 15-point bonus on top of the longest route bonus. And the coolest thing it does, it introduces larger cards. So even in the base, if you buy Ticket to Ride today, it's a smaller card. It's not like a traditional deck of card size card. It's not a bad size, but it's a small size. And then if you play, like when Brad played with us that night and we played with my larger cards, he was so disappointed when he bought Ticket to Ride that it was the small ones. Because again, it's kind of like Quacks. Once you've had the chunky plastic pieces, Quacks is never the same. So 1910, it's not an essential expansion, but it gives you variety because it starts adding more routes in there. And it gives you a couple other minor ways to play. Like you can go just big cities, a couple other little things to do based on the tickets that got in there. The other games we'll talk about, the other one that's known well is Ticket to Ride Europe. Gameplay is the same, except it actually has tunnels in there because you're going through Europe and you're traveling through tunnels to go through Italy and Switzerland and whatnot. And it has a mechanism by if there's a tunnel and the tunnel has a unique shape to it, if it's a 3-thing tunnel, say, I'm going to go try the tunnel with pink. And then the top 2 cards are turned over off the top of the deck. And if there's any pinks, you have to pay that many more than the route. So if the route was a 3 train path and you said pink or red and a red was turned over, now you owe 4 reds for that route. So it's a little push your luck on if I only have 3 reds, do I waste a whole turn? Because if you can't pay for it, that was your turn and you don't get to do anything. It also introduced, so Ticket to Ride Europe, many people just from in the board game sphere like it more because it throws a little bit more strategy in there, throws a little bit more chance in there and some more tighter routes in there as well. It also has train depots in which you can play a depot which extends your train so that you could have a depot and go through someone else's track, if that makes sense. So you could they've blocked you off, but if you put I think it's called a depot, you can it wouldn't count for longest train, but it would count for your route connecting between 2 places. If I pull out a Ticket to Ride, I pull out Ticket to Ride Europe. If I just want to go play Ticket to Ride for sure. Love the base game, but if I want to do that, if we're teaching it, there's one called Rails and Sails. I've never played, but it probably gets some of the highest reviews out there. We actually had randomly, I answered a customer service email yesterday for Foundation, and he replied back, "Oh, I'm a big fan of Bards the Board." I was like, "Oh, awesome." I was like, and I was working on the show notes. This was last night. I said, "I'm literally working on the show notes right now. We're doing Ticket to Ride." He's like, "Oh, I love Ticket to Ride, Rails and Sails." So Joshua, if you're listening, hope you like this episode, brother. Rails and Sails is another one, a unique one that I have that's actually out of print, and I've talked about it before. It's called Ticket to Ride Märklin. It's what Ticket to Ride Germany has become because it's based in Germany, and it goes anywhere from like $100 to $200 on eBay on any given day. I will only sell that if I literally need money to pay for medical bills or something. All right, that's how much I love. But it introduces passengers. So now you have this new thing where you put out points on spaces, and then you send a passenger down your train route to get points at all those spots. Super, like totally different strategy, right? Some people think it's you still have to build routes. You're still taking train cars. You're still building your routes for paths you're trying to make. But now you have other scoring opportunities as well. There's a bunch of Ticket to Rides out there. There's Ticket to Ride, Ticket to Ride London, Ticket to Ride New York, or these smaller versions that you can get for like $15 that are like basically like a family introduction level version of them. I think there's a Ticket to Ride Junior we never played. Yeah. But these Ticket to Rides we had, and we realized they're just too light for me. But they'd be great if I'd got that available for my 5-year-old, my 6-year-old, because the artwork's a little bit brighter, super easy. The game, I think the longest train route's like 3 or 4 total, but it teaches you the basics of Ticket to Ride. There's a whole world of the Ticket to Ride expansions and specifically the other versions of Ticket to Ride that all give you the same feels. They can't be ignored because you may play one of those and realize, oh wow, I like the way this ramps this up with this difference. In Africa, there's ones in India, ones that I haven't played most of those. So, but there's lots of variations out there, and so you just kind of find the one that you like and go with it.
Yeah. Germany is the one Germany is probably the expansion that I played and I enjoyed the most. And since obviously derived from Märklin, one of my favorite parts about playing Ticket to Ride Germany was that I had a friend who did a study abroad in Germany. And so while we played, he was and obviously connected with you as well, living in Germany for some time. While we played it, the nostalgia that you get through of playing this game of he was telling us stories of I literally took this route from here to here on a train. And here's the person that I met and his name was Johannes. And and walking us through the stories, it made the game so much more memorable. And then adding those passengers on. So I truly would say The expansions are a great next step for sure. As I really love this concept. I'm finding the game to sort of become stale for me. The expansions are entirely different boards. The concepts are there, but they adapt. So, Jason, you want to jump into cookie scale? I can go first if you want, or you can go. What's your vibe? Who do you want to go first?
I'll let you go first this time.
Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and dive in because I know what Jason's is going to be. Like I should say, unless he's like somehow he's going to shock the world here. But I really thought about putting this as a like. When I first thought of it, I wanted to call it a peanut butter for me because I was like, okay, here's how I feel about this. Do I get excited to play Ticket to Ride? Like when someone's like, oh, hey, we're going to play this. But then I had to like sort of set my feelings aside because where I play Ticket to Ride the most now is with my in-laws. Because once again, my mother-in-law is like very averse to learning new games. And so I know this can be played. But this last trip that I went on to play a tournament, Catan was played. And I was like, you know what? I think I would rather play Ticket to Ride over Catan every day of the week. Not that Catan's a bad game, and I will say going back to it, it was pleasant. It was very pleasant. I know we trash talk Catan a lot on here, Settlers of Catan, for those of you who are not as familiar. And so I found myself missing Ticket to Ride. And when we brought it up that we're going to do an episode with this, I was like, man, I'm going to see like Jason's glee on the other side of this. And I don't want to rob him of that. But the more that I think about it, I very much enjoy this. And I truly think of the games that we've called double doozies here and that I've passed the double doozy off to. I called Herstory a double doozy. And I think if you had to ask me right now, would I rather play Her Story or Ticket to Ride? I think I would pick Ticket to Ride. And so for that reason, it's a double doozy for me. Like it's up there simply because whether you're a first time gamer, I would say having this in your collection is a must. Any version of this is a must. If you're going to build a collection, we said you should have the big three in there. And of the big three, Carcassone is my favorite of the big three. But that does not take away from the beauty that Ticket to Ride brings. And when I think of it, I also go back to why Ticket to Ride stands as a double doozy. And I'll kind of close it here because I gave all these reasons on like limitations. Because honestly, I feel like lots of times if I go first on cookie scale, Jason, we hear the phrase, for all those reasons, completely true. And I want you to be able to say all of them, Jason. So the last thing that I'll say is like, when I think about playing Ticket to Ride Germany with my friend Isaac and him telling those stories, I hope one day I'm able to play Ticket to Ride with my family and us tell stories about when we were in Phoenix, us tell stories of when we were in Florida and like relive those. If you travel, this is a must. And I can only imagine how much more enriching the experience is as you play it. Jason, what's it rate for you?
So I'll be honest. I was surprised it was a double doozy because I knew you liked it because it's one of the OGs. You know, when we did our top 10 list to start a collection, if those remember or those who've listened to that episode, if not, it was episode 10. Ticket and our caveat for that who didn't listen is we had to put the three OGs somewhere in there: Carcassone, Settlers, and Ticket to Ride. And Ticket to Ride, I think, was like my number 2 or my number 3. It was by far my highest of the OGs, and it could easily come back and forth. Now, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and say like my rating is for almost the Ticket to Ride system because there's so many of them. So full cheat here. I know I'm breaking the rules ever so slightly, but it applies to this game as well. There's because we haven't talked about another one that has this many versions of that game that are just enough. But because 3 of them, I have 3 and I love them all. I mean, it's no secret there, right? It's a double doozy for me. And there's a lot of reasons it's a double doozy. One is the sentimentality I mentioned earlier. Like, this is a game we played a ton with our kids, a ton with our kids. This is the first game that introduced me to the modern hobby, right? Settlers was game number 2 that same night or the next night, playing with Joey, but Ticket to Ride was the first one. So I like that. I have this very odd, so I'll talk about this odd memory about it first. But in the same way your friend talks about going through Germany, we have the same experience when we play Ticket to Ride Maryland and Ticket to Ride Europe, because we visited half of Europe. So it's like, oh, we've been there and we've been here. And so it's those little kind of things that we can connect ourselves to it. But I have this very odd memory of being in Europe, and we had gone to Prague. We'd gone to Prague, which is in the Czech Republic, for a Christmas market, and it was getting late, and we went back to the hotel, and the kids went to bed because our kids were still younger, but Liz and I were up. And I remember having the Ticket to Ride app had just come out. So this is a random story, but I remember Liz and I both just playing Ticket to Ride over and over, because we realized there were like challenges. Hey, win a game with winning 5 tickets, win a game with winning 7 tickets, win a game with 100 points. And I played so many. I just remember I loved the Prague the Prague Christmas market was amazing. We loved it. We have amazing pictures. Our kids were little bitty there. We had a great time. We drove over for like one day and drove back the next. It was like a 4.5 hour drive, from where we live. But I just remember staying up late and playing that. Me and Elizabeth just having a good just playing the app while the kids slept, right? Such odd memories, but we've played it so much. It doesn't get played a lot. Like when I pulled out BG stats, like I've played the OG Ticket to Ride 3 times in 4 years. And one of those was when we talked, Kimberly and Brad. One of those was the other day, me and Elizabeth, where I smoked her, Robbie. I wasn't going to say this, but she doesn't listen anyway, so it's good. I beat her 132 to 32 by 100 points. 100 points. I beat her because she tried to go big, and she had 2 big routes she didn't get because I got them, not intentionally. So she had like 20 points, like Seattle, Portland to Atlanta or whatever, right? She had 2 of those, one Seattle, one Portland, and she didn't complete them. And so that was like 41 points alone that she went negative. So anyway,
wow.
But I played 3 times, but I played the app in those same 4 years. You could probably say it for your Wingspan. I've played the app probably hundreds of times. I probably played hundreds of games of Ticket to Ride on the app because I love the challenge of what tickets it gives me. What can I do? What tickets it gives me? How can I do this? Can I complete this perfect one? Because I like to just complete a long route and just keep taking tickets and keep taking tickets and keep taking tickets just for the challenge of it. And then when I think about Maryland, I haven't played Maryland forever. I'm like, but I love playing Ticket to Ride Maryland. So it's Settlers. I don't want to play it all. Great game. Perfect. I don't ever want to play that game. Like I have no desire. If people want to play it, I would truly try to talk them into playing something else, but then play if they want me to. Carcassone, super great, fun to play. A lot of other games that replace that. There's not a game that replaces what Ticket to Ride is for me because it's set collection and route building by turning those in. Super light, super basic, but there's not another game in which I'm collecting things and creating a route on something in my collection I can even think off the top of my head that would replace that. So it's one that it's easy to be a double doozy. It's one that a lot of folks have played before. Like if I say, hey, I want to introduce you to Ticket to Ride, oh, we've already played that. I'm like, that's how great of a game it is. That even people know Settlers first, but Ticket to Ride, they know more than Carcassonne for that number 2 game. And oddly, Sushi Go is often the 3rd one now. A lot of people I know Sushi Go, but Ticket to Ride will always be that for us and will always be in there. Like if I had to do a top 100, I'd be shocked if I didn't have one of those in my top 20 with all these other Euro games that I love, deep, crunchy, heavy thinking games. I'd be shocked if one of the Ticket to Rides weren't in my top 20.
Dude, I love it. And I am glad that you have this, this connection to a game. I think my hope is for you listening, when we started this podcast, the idea was introducing people to the hobby game world. And we hope that we grow old with you in your board gaming world, and that we are the Bards talking about this for years to come. And for some of you, you're listening and you are experienced gamers already. And so we want that to be the case. And I truly think, Jason, that we're going to have talked about Quacks so much that for some people, they're going to be like, that's Quacks for me. Like Ticket to Ride for Jason is Quacks at Quedlinburg for me. Thanks to Bards of the Board. That's my dream. That we have introduced you guys to a game in that way. So Jason, final thoughts as we wrap it up.
No, I'm glad we talked about it because I was hesitant because I was texting you and I even threw that one in as like, okay, maybe we'll do that one so we keep it light because at some point we're gonna have to go heavier. Heavier is relative, right? But like we'll talk after this. But Ryder came over tonight. We played a game. I'm like, I want this to be very soon. And you and I played it before, but I was hesitant at first, but I was definitely glad we did it. I just looking fantastic. February things are still up, even though it's almost May. But Ticket to Ride, the other sentimentality, the reason we love this game is because that traditionally was always our first game of the month was Ticket to Ride because everybody in my family knew Ticket to Ride. Everybody in my family loved Ticket to Ride, and it wasn't one we had to refresh our mind because you don't have to refresh anything. If you play Ticket to Ride a few times, there is no. Now, what do we do here? What is the rule? The main rule is okay. The double route is it 3 players or 4 players? After that, good. So I love it. What about you? Any parting thoughts on Ticket to Ride?
Yeah, no, I'm here for it. I think it's great. I've talked about like a sentiment with Settlers of Catan is when I heard that some people like when you win a game of Settlers of Catan, you get to name almost like Legacy-esque that you get to name one of the like tiles, like you get to claim the tile and like write a name on it, write all that. And I think I would love like to take Ticket to Ride and have it be like whatever route you feel was most helpful for you, like claim one of the routes. And this is no longer like Phoenix to New York City. This is the Jason Collins route. And like, oh, you got the Jason Collins route. Like, and so you could just have this history in front of you of like, here's all the people that we introduced to Ticket to Ride in the winners. And I love looking back at the winners wall that we have in our basement and knowing like, oh man, like Abby's on this board. Why is Abby on the board? Oh, Abby's on the board because she won Call to Adventure. And like so-and-so's on the game or the board because he won Pass the Popcorn. He won Pass the Popcorn again. Okay. Actually, he only has won Pass the Popcorn. Like there's some fun aspects of that to the game. And I look back at names that are on our winners wall that are like, they're probably never going to get to my house again to play, but I can always remember that time. And Ticket to Ride, while simple, can be introduced to so many people. And how cool would that be? Like Kimberly wins the first time she comes and plays Ticket to Ride. And now Kimberly's name is forever ingrained in every other Ticket to Ride game we're going to have. Just really, really cool opportunities. So, y'all, that'll wrap it up for today's episode. We thank you for listening, and we hope you have an amazing rest of your week. We're going to have to chat offline because the next time we're supposed to have an episode, I will technically be in Lynchburg. So we'll have to adjust accordingly. So we'll see. We'll see what all influences come, but we're one episode away. This is episode 18. So we're one episode away from another list. If we keep our vibe that we had talked about way back when of like the 10s are lists and the 5s are guests. So what lists would you guys want to see? Let us know in the comments, leave reviews to let us know what list you want to see at episode 20. So that's right around the corner. But in the meantime, we hope you have a great one and we'll see you in 2 weeks.